Hi, I'm Lucas, and I help Chris with marketing. And you might think Chris is just a pretty face. Well, you're probably right. But first, check this out.
I didn't do this like the correct way. I didn't do it like the smart way, I guess, because I just didn't know a whole lot back then. I didn't have an emergency fund. I didn't have any of that stuff. I just started throwing like almost all of my paycheck at the student loans. And then 18 months later, they were gone. Through that process, I got really excited about personal finance and just wanted to spread this message. I was like, I'm going to start a blog. And I Googled some stuff. And I was like, okay, people do this and they actually make money.
Alrighty, everyone. This is the Money Peach Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Peach, and I'm going to be bringing on some of the most amazing people I can find so they can tell you how they do their life and their money the right way. I was really excited to record this episode today. It's with the founder of Millennial Money Man, Bobby Hoyt. Bobby and I have been friends for now a couple years. We actually started our blogs without knowing each other. He's in Texas, I'm in Arizona, literally 2 months apart from each other. And we've been each other's cheerleaders while we've been growing these things. And it's been a lot of fun. But Bobby's coming on the show today to talk about leaving his job as a teacher to start a blog. What was money like? What did he have to do to sacrifice to pay off $40,000 in debt? And there's something that him and I are both passionate about is going out and finding a mentor. And in fact, during this episode, I am going to have a call to action for you. I am challenging you to do something by the end of the week. So if you're listening to this on Saturday, you only got a couple hours, all right? The bottom line is this episode has a ton of value into it. You're really going to get a lot out of it. And I promise you the call to action is going to make you better. So without further ado, let me bring on Bobby Hoyt from millennialmoneyman.com. Dun, dun, dun. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm introducing for the very first time on the Money Peach Podcast, the actual Millennial Money Man himself, Bobby Hoyt. Bobby, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited about this one. I've wanted to be on this podcast for probably about a year now, so I'm excited.
The funny thing about this is before we hit record, we were kind of going back and forth, just kind of reminiscing a little bit, but my very first time ever starting a blog post was literally weeks after your very first time starting your very first or posting your very first blog post, kind of in a similar niche. I think we're targeting different audiences, but now fast forward 3 years later, here we are. We're finally doing the show together. But three years ago, I remember there was all these giant bloggers out there, and there was these two new guys that no one had ever heard of, and it was you and I.
It's funny. I still don't feel like anybody's ever heard of me. I don't know why. The site has grown a lot, and I've been very fortunate to have some success with it. And I still feel like I'm new to it. It's weird.
I think you're always going to feel like you're new. We've had a couple of guests on the show. We had Michelle Schroeder Gardner. She's making Sense of Sense. And I think she started her blog in like 2010. And I mean, talking to her off air, she still talks about how, this is kind of new to her. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I think everybody feels that way. I still feel that way. And, I'll be helping, I'm sure you do the same thing. You're helping somebody else get started. And then you realize wow, I guess I know a lot, but I didn't realize I knew this much.
Yeah, that's a good point. When when we were doing all these courses and all these launches that I've done recently, it was like, I can't believe how much information I know about such an obscure, just blogging. It's so weird, but I would have never thought that this was kind of what I was doing, but I love it. So it's been really cool.
Bobby, before we jump into, everything Millennial Money Man, when I first heard about you, I was reading your stuff on your blog, and you were actually not a full-time blogger. Tell us what you did. You lived in Texas, but what was your job?
I used to be a high school band director, and it wasn't really that long ago. It was about 3 years ago. Basically, I taught the drum line at a high school, and I did a couple of things. Like I taught middle school too and high school at the same time, but that was it. I started Millennial Money Man just kind of like on the nights and weekends after teaching band all day.
So teaching band all day in Texas. And in Texas, football is huge. If football is that big, the band has to be as big or bigger because, you have to have
that's intuitive. Most people don't actually put that together. Like the football programs in Texas are like mini college programs. The funding for them is insane. And so kind of by proxy, the band programs get a lot of funding as well. So Texas high school band and football are just like, it's well funded. And so at my school, there were, I think, 4 or 5 band directors full time. And it's like that at almost every large school in Texas, like large high school, at least.
Wow. See, I didn't know it was that big. Like the high school I grew up, we had football and we had band, right? And there was 1 band director. I can't imagine there even being 2. And you're saying there was 5. So definitely different, right? But that's Texas. Football's like almost life in Texas.
Yeah, it was crazy. I just real quick on the football thing. Like We had thousands of people come to every Friday football game. It was insane. So yeah, it's crazy out here.
Okay, so you have your job, you're happy. What makes you decide that, you know what, on the weekends, I'm going to do something that has nothing to do with band, nothing to do with music. I'm going to start writing a blog about my debt, and I'm going to call it Millennial Money Man. How in the world do you go from point A to point B there?
Okay, so basically, when I graduated from college, I had no interest in money. I actually specifically remember, I don't know if I've ever said this on a podcast before, I specifically remember telling my parents that I did not care about money, and that's why I was going into teaching. And because they were, my parents were considered, like, my dad's an engineer. I'm sure he wanted me to kind of go that same route. And I was like, I don't care about how much money I make. And then, like, you fast forward to now, and like, that's what my entire, like, everything that I do centers around that. But so I graduated from college. I had $40,000 of student loan debt, and I was just going to, like, make the minimum payments on it. I was going to kind of do, I didn't have a plan at all, because I honestly, I just didn't care that much. And I went, my wife has a good family friend that owns a ski boat, which I know you can relate to. And he took us out water skiing one day, and he's a really successful business owner. He owned a swimming pool company for a long time. And so he just started talking to me about my student loans and stuff. I was like 23 at the time, I think. I hadn't even started at my band director job. And he was just like, so what are you going to do about the loans? And I was like, I don't know, make the payments. I mean, what else do you do? And he was like, no, you really need to pay him off. And at first I was kind of like, I don't know about that. But I started hanging out with him more. He actually kind of became a mentor to me over the years. But we started going water skiing with him more. And just every time we went out, he would talk to me a little bit more about student loans. And then eventually he just kind of convinced me that I needed to pay him off. And so I did. I at the time, my wife and we moved in and started renting a room from her parents, which was kind of like a temporary thing, but it was like, okay, well, while we're doing this, and now that I was like fired up about paying off my student loans, I was like, we'll just stay here for a while. I didn't do this like the correct way. I didn't do it like the smart way, I guess, because again, I just didn't know a whole lot back then. I just started throwing like most of my paycheck. I didn't have an emergency fund. I didn't have any of that stuff. I just started throwing like almost all of my paycheck at the student loans. And then 18 months later, they were gone. Through that process, I got really excited about personal finance, and just, I wanted to kind of like spread this message. And I stumbled on, I was like, I'm going to start a blog. And I Googled some stuff, and I think Aaron Lowry's Broke Millennial blog came up. And I was like, okay, people do this and they actually make money. And so I was like, okay, I'll start this blog. And I stumbled on the name Millennial Money Man because I was going to call it something else that was really dumb before. That wasn't available, whatever it was, I can't remember. So then I kind of like just typed in a bunch of things, found Millennial Money Man. And then I really dove into it. And so just to get back to where you started, like the weekends, I worked like 60 hours a week as a band director. So the weekends were the only time that I could actually work on the blog or do anything. I just started writing, and I found out I was good at it, So then I got really passionate about it. And so that's pretty much how I started it all.
Yeah, I think in the very beginning, when you start a blog, I mean, you might be different than me, but I eventually saw that you could generate income. I was like, that is going to be an excellent byproduct. But blogging itself, to me, it just seemed like it was something that was like, wow, I could express myself on this blog. My mom's going to read it and my wife's going to read it. And right now that's all, and you just get to go out there and you get to, you're not an expert in anything, right? But you're an expert in your own opinion. That's what I like about blogs is you can get some really authentic, real content. And so when I read your stuff, it's like, I don't feel like I'm reading something from, like MSN. I feel like I'm having a beer with Bobby and he's telling me how it is. And, when you're starting something like that, like you and I come from the same, I'm still a full-time firefighter. And, I've done the research, and there are zero firemen out there who are blogging. I mean, like, it just does not happen. Like firemen are these like big, manly, like rough around the edges. No one's sitting at their computer, in a coffee shop blogging. And I'm doing that. It's so crazy to me. And then same thing with you is, I've done the research. I don't see a lot of band directors out there who have started personal finance blogs. I might be wrong, but I have not found them. Just you.
Yeah, there's not a lot of it. Blogging is such an interesting thing because it's like, to me, it seems like such a big thing now. And like we were talking kind of off air about how much opportunity there is in blogging still and all of that. But I think, before that, I'd never even heard of blogging like for a living. I mean, I guess maybe I'd heard of it. I didn't think it was a possibility. I know teachers that have blogs, but I don't know any that blog about personal finance. But, that's just one of those things. Like a lot of teachers are like me, and hopefully nobody gets mad. But a lot of teachers are like how I was, because you know that you're never going to make a lot of money. And so you kind of just accept your income situation. And that I think a lot of teachers, from my experience, don't even really like to talk about personal finance because it's kind of like a sore subject.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, and so the same thing with the firemen. Firemen, there's not rich firemen, right? Firemen, police officers, teachers, even nurses in that category. I mean, I don't think anybody signs up to do those jobs to say, man, I cannot wait to get rich, right? That's not the avenue to do it. It's a great career. I love my career, but it's not the avenue to get rich.
Yeah. Well, it's same with teaching. A lot of people say it, but like from the outside looking in, people are like, why would people be teachers? But I didn't come across many teachers that weren't super passionate about teaching kids, so they focus on that and then they kind of ignore the personal finance thing in a lot of situations. So I think that's probably why there's a lack of voices from that community.
So going back to your story a little bit, you had said you paid off $40,000, you said in 18 months. I mean, obviously anybody that's ever come on this show, anybody I've ever talked to that's paid off a ton of debt, paid off any debt at all, no one has ever said, yeah, I just woke up and paid it off. It was easy, right? You have to make some extreme, intense sacrifices. And I know you already labeled one of them, right? You moved in with your in-laws and rented a room. That is a sacrifice. I don't care who you are, but when you move in with your in-laws, that is a sacrifice, right? As much as you love them, it's still a sacrifice. What were some of the other sacrifices that you had to make? Was it saying no to things? Was it, pulling back your lifestyle? What did you have to do to pay off $40,000 on a teacher's salary?
Yeah, and it was all on the teacher's salary. I didn't have a side hustle. I didn't even know about side hustling back then. The biggest thing, it wasn't necessarily sacrifices. It was just, I had to let all my friends pass me up. And that's the part that sucked, because it was like, we were renting this room. I didn't even have a closet. My clothes were my in-laws' house is actually pretty small. And we were just like in a 10 by 10 bedroom. So yeah, that was a sacrifice. I didn't have a closet. I had to keep the same car that I had from college, which is like this little 2-door truck with like roll up windows. And actually, because of my mentor, his name's Mike, he was just like, let your friends pass you up. And I did. And so my friends were going out on the cool vacations and like buying the nice houses. And I felt like I was stuck for a long time, because living with your in-laws is not fun, and then watching all of your friends like do cool stuff is not fun either. So, I would say that was probably the biggest sacrifice, but it wasn't like I had that stuff before. I just never really let my lifestyle inflate.
How did you stay so motivated through that process then? Because 18 months, right? That's a year and a half long that you're sitting in a 10 by 10 bedroom, not sitting there, but you're living in a 10 by 10 bedroom. Your in-laws are down the hall. Your friends are on Facebook going to the Caribbean and going on cruises. You're sitting there and you're like, what the hell is going on here? Am I making the right choice? I mean, what made you stay motivated? Because there are so many people listening right now that are like, wow, how do I do that?
Part of it for me is kind of my personality. I don't know if it's a flaw or a good thing, but when I start doing something, I get really into it. I get like obsessed with it, So for me, the student loan thing was like, I'm going to do this until it's done. And it's kind of been the same thing with my business and my blog. Like, I'm going to do it until I don't even know when I can be done with it, but I'm going to do it and grow it as fast as I possibly can. And so that was a big part of it. But I think at the same time, when you're paying off debt, I knew I was doing something different than what everybody else was doing. And I knew I was doing something special, because when I would talk about it with people, they were like, oh, that sounds crazy. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to do this thing that's different. And it's funny because it's like, everybody, while you're paying off debt or when you're doing some kind of sacrifice like that, they kind of like go, that's dumb. I would never do that. And then when you finish, they're all like, wait, how do I do that? So that's something I think that just kind of like, maybe I just had like a chip on my shoulder or something. I don't know. I just got really into it and I just wanted to kind of cross the finish line with it.
The thing is you get that all the time. Somebody's going to see what you're doing, right? And they're not going to jump on board with you right away. They're going to see like, he's going to fail. There's no way he's going to be able to do this. And then do it, right? And it's like, oh, I remember this happened to my wife and I. We paid off $52,000. And I remember during that process, the same thing. We were saying no to everything. We were selling furniture in our house, pictures off the wall. We sold our cars. I was cleaning pools in my own neighborhood, going door to door. I mean, anything that I could do to generate more income and cut back. It's all we did. And we did this it was 7 months solid that we did this. And I remember during that time, it sucked because we were working our butts off. We were the same thing, seeing all of our friends moving forward, doing fun stuff, things that we wanted to desperately do. But we stayed motivated, right? We stayed motivated kind of just like you. Then we come to the finish line. And I'm not going to lie, we were rah-rahing like crazy because everybody told us there's no way you could do that. And we did it. And so we were not like shy. We were like, heck yeah, we're debt free. I mean, it was like a big deal. And all of a sudden, that's how Money Peach started, was people coming over to the house for dinner being like, hey, like maybe you can show me what you did. Those were like our first financial talks. This was a while ago, way before the actual blog. But it's so funny, like, man, you and I both were opposite of the blogging world. And then we find the blog, and, you and I are right around the same age, and we started the blog 3 months. I mean, it's just kind of crazy how our worlds intersect here. So, hey, congratulations on paying off that debt and getting started. But I want to transition now into Millennial Money Man. So somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, Bobby. No, they say, hey, Millennial Money Man, right? Hey, Millennial Money Man. What is your site about? What do you tell them?
It's funny. It's changed so much. It used to just be straight up personal finance. And now it's kind of a mix of personal finance and entrepreneurship as I've gotten more interested in different things. But it's just, the goal of my site, I'm not trying to be the number one personal finance expert out there for millennials. I'm just trying to create a place where people can go and get excited about money, and then, have a community to talk about with it. And then if they want to go in whatever different direction to whatever guru they want to go to, like, they can do that. But for me, I just want to be the starting point, because that was something, with my mentor, Mike, that was the starting point for me. And so many people don't have that. And so, for me, it's like, I want my site to be the starting point, whether it's you're going to start a side hustle, or if you want to pay off your debt, or if you want to start learning more about investing. Like, I just want to be the person that kind of sparks the fire, and then they can learn as much as they want from me or from anybody else. So that's probably how I'd wrap it up.
I feel like the reason, Bobby, you've had so much success is when you come to your site, right away you get the feel of, this isn't some banker breathing down my throat telling me that I'm stupid for not investing this much or what. This is a guy that I can completely 100% relate to, right? You look at that going, this is me, right? I can relate to this guy. And I think that's why, like you said, it's a great starting point. People who are like, they're thinking, man, I got to make a change. I got to do something. And they land on your site. And it's like, oh, I get this. This guy gets me. And then you provide even more value by, giving them great information, but also catapulting them to the next level, wherever that may be. If it's going to somebody else's site or whatever, that's cool. Right? That's providing a ton of value. One thing that you said that really stuck out to me, you've said this a bunch of times, is your mentor, Mike. So how does that relationship work with you and Mike?
We pretty much just drink beer a lot and talk about money. But it goes a little bit further. That's kind of how it started. We would just go, and I would go up to his pool shop. We'd go water skiing and everything. And he was my wife's father's best friend. He was kind of winding down his business, and he had worked in the pool industry for 30 years. And so he was winding down. I think he just had all this information. He doesn't have kids. So I think he just wanted to kind of pass that information on to somebody else. And so we would just kind of like sit there and drink a beer. And then he'd be like, hey, do you know what a profit and loss statement is? And I'd be like, no, because I didn't know anything. And he'd pull out his accounting program and be like, this is how you do accounting. Like, this is a P&L statement. This is expenses, top line, bottom line, gross. Like, he would teach me all that stuff. And like, then, as we came even closer, he would show me, he taught me about his investment strategy. He basically he's like a buy and hold, goes for dividends. But he would show me his portfolio. We just became really good friends. So we're like best friends, but we're 30 years apart in age. But it's just been a really cool thing. And he learned stuff from me because I know how to use computers and stuff like that, and he doesn't. So it's just been a really interesting thing that's been really cool to have somebody I could kind of bounce ideas off of as I've grown my business.
Did you seek him out, or did he seek you?
Really neither. I mean, it was just, my wife just was like, hey, let's go water skiing, and I was like, okay, I don't think I've ever done that before. It was just, I got on there and he was the guy that owned the boat. So, as he was getting closer to retirement, he wanted more people. When you own a boat, this, like, when you own a boat, you want to take people out on it. And so we became like part of his crew that he'd take out, and that's just how we became friends. Boating is a really cool way to make new friends. And that's kind of how it all happened.
I'm a huge believer in finding, you can call it a mentor, you can call it a guide, you can call it, somebody you look up to. And the reason why I'm asking you this is one of the most popular, it is the most downloaded episode. I was just checking while you were talking. The most downloaded episode we have in Money Peach is an interview. We'll put links in the show notes, and I think it was episode 38, but it's an interview that I did with my mentor. We got connected, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, just kind of by randomly. It wasn't, and I realized, like, this guy's a high level thinker. This guy is one of the nicest guys I've met. So I just straight up asked him, hey, I need a mentor. And, that was like very difficult for me to do, right? Because a lot of us, we think we have all the answers. We don't need any help, right? And so when I remember picking up the phone and being like, hey, how's your day going? By the way, I need a mentor. And I remember his response was, I was wondering when you were going to ask me. I tell that to everybody because there's somebody that you can think of right now. Like if you're listening right now, think of that person, right? It might be one or two people. Who are they? What do they do? What do they look like? How do they treat other people? If you want to be like them, the best way is to simply ask them, can we go meet for coffee? Can we go meet for a beer? And so the crazy thing is here is the same thing that you're doing in Houston by going and having a beer and talking about money. That's the exact same thing I'm doing here in Phoenix. We literally once a month, we go to like a sports bar and sit down, grab a beer. And I remember learning what a profit and loss statement was. When you said that, I started laughing because I didn't know what that was either. But it's been so many other things because, they have more experience in every aspect of life. Usually they're a little bit older and they have a lot more knowledge than you. I mean, we go as far as talking about friendship and marriages and, not just money. The money part's fun, but we talk about everything. And the reason why I'm glad that you brought it up, I asked you about it again, is because the biggest takeaway I have for listeners today, this is it, okay? Go find a mentor. Promise yourself by the end of the week, you are going to find a mentor. Ask them, what's the worst? Do they say no? Then ask the second person you had in mind. Eventually, someone's going to say yes, but I guarantee it. Bobby, tell me if I'm wrong here. The people you ask for help, they want to help you.
It's so funny because it's like people feel like, I've had the same conversation with people. It's like you need to go find a mentor, but it's not like mentors are just like, it's not like you can just go to the store and get a mentor, but it's always somebody that's just like in your family or somebody that you kind of know. If I did not have a mentor, I would not be where I am with my business right now. I would probably be in a lot of debt, whether it's like credit card debt or I'd still have student loans for sure. I'd still be in a career that I didn't really enjoy. I just don't even know where I'd be without that. And it's kind of crazy to think. I haven't really stopped to think about that in a while, but just that one friendship that kind of turned into a mentorship. I mean, that completely changed the course of my life. And so, I would, if you have somebody in mind, go talk to them. You don't even have to ask them to be a mentor. Just go talk to them and just learn as much as you can from them.
Absolutely. Tom Corley, he wrote the book Rich Habits. So he went around the country and interviewed thousands of wealthy people and asked them what their rich habits were or what their daily routines look like. He put all this research together in his book. And so one of the things he has in there is almost all successful people, highly successful people, have somebody that they call a mentor or somebody they meet with. Even the most successful people on the planet are doing this. Not just, people who want to be successful, but the people who we look up say, oh, they've made it. They're at the highest level. They all have mentors. You're listening to this podcast for a reason, right? You want to have better financial practices. Maybe you're thinking about starting a blog. Maybe you're thinking about starting a business. So best practices, right? Instead of reinventing the wheel, let's go find what other successful people are doing and let's have them help us do the exact same thing. Bobby just said his business would not be where it was today unless they had that relationship. And I would 100% agree. If I didn't meet John a few years ago, I would have a blog that made no money, right? It would just be like, right? It would not generate any income. And Bobby and I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. And so it all goes back to, finding those leaders in your life, right? And like you said, you don't go to the mentor store, right? There's no mentor store. But pay attention to those relationships that you develop because sometimes you're like, oh, wait a second. This was a relationship that was developed for a reason. All right, moving on. We've talked a lot about mentors, but the reason why is I want you to find a mentor by the end of the week. That's your challenge. All right, Bobby, let's talk about Millennial Money Man, okay? I'm dying to know, and I'm sure our listeners are dying to know, you are no longer a band director.
Right.
So how did you go full time?
So basically what I did, and this is not something I would recommend for anybody that starts a blog or any kind of business. I was doing the blog, I was writing content, and I was just like, man, I think I could do this, but I hadn't made any money at the time, and I was still band directing. And so about 6 months into the blog, I discussed with my mentor quitting and just running the blog full time. I didn't have any income streams or anything like that, but I just felt like I knew that I could make it work, or at least I hope that I can make it work. So after I paid off my student loans, my wife and I kept living the same way. Like we didn't get the whole lifestyle inflation thing. We kept renting from her parents and kept driving old cars. We just started saving up money. So she saved up and paid for our wedding. We actually weren't married at the time I paid off my student loans, but we got married after that. We just kept saving up money. So we saved up about a year of my salary, and I was texting my mentor one day outside of the school because at this point, I really didn't want to be a band director anymore. And I was like, man, we've got $50,000 saved up. And I was like, one more year, just one more year, and then I'll quit. And he texted me back really quickly and was like, in the grand scheme of life, there's not a whole lot of difference between $50,000 and say $100,000. He's like, if you want to do it, you need to go do it now. And so I went home. I talked to Coral, my wife, about it. I slept on it, and I went in the next day and I told my boss that I was going to quit. And so then, that was before my contract was up. So there was still probably like 3 weeks of total awkwardness when everybody knew I was leaving. And then after that, I started blogging full time. I wasn't making any money for probably the first, 3 months. So I started doing marketing work for local businesses in my area. And the first one I did was the jeweler that did my wife's engagement ring. And so I just started running their blog. Well, I didn't just start. Like, it took a long time to get them to hire me to do it. But I started running their blog. I started doing their email marketing, just all those things that I did with my own blog. And so that was how I kind of paid the bills while I continued to grow Millennial Money Man. And now it's just turned into this thing where I've got like a team. We've got like 4 people. I've got 4 assistants and a business partner, all this other crazy stuff. So it's pretty weird to see how it's kind of blown up.
Do you think you'd be at where you're at today if you would have waited that extra year?
No, not at all. Well, and I think, the thing for me too, and I didn't even know this at the time, I started Millennial Money Man. The millennial thing was still not, everybody was still just like making fun of millennials, and they still do for, the being hipsters and everything. But, I jumped in on Millennial Money Man at a time where there really wasn't very much saturation in that market. It was me and then Grant Sabatier from Millennial Money kind of started our sites around the same time. I think if I hadn't started it at that point, somebody, one, would have already taken the name. And two, I think I just got in at a really good time for millennials and for that kind of that space.
Remember John Lee Dumas once said, if you haven't heard of John Lee Dumas, he has a podcast. And he's the first person that I know of that decided that he wasn't going to do a weekly podcast. He was going to do a daily podcast. And so you can imagine the logistics that goes into that. I run a weekly podcast. It's time consuming. And he runs one every single day. And he has, I think, almost 2,000 episodes in a row. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. I remember he said one time, he's like, you either got to be first or you got to be the best. And he goes, I was not the best, but I was the first one to have a podcast 7 days a week. And the reason why that hit home for me is I was neither the first or the best in growing Money Peach. That's what I thought, right? And so one of the things that for me in the very beginning is I didn't tell anybody, Bobby, that I was a fireman. That was like voodoo, right? I'm not telling who the heck's going to listen to some firefighter talk about money? Nobody, right? They're going to listen to the CPAs and the bankers or the financial advisors. That's what I thought. And I remember my mentor telling me, he's like, that's your unfair advantage. How many firefighters are out there talking about money? I'm like, none. He's like, exactly. You're different. Be you. And that's when I just came out and I started telling people, yes, I'm a full-time firefighter. People are like, wow, that's cool. I'm like, that was not the reaction I thought. So, keep that in mind. You either got to be first, right? Or early on, not first, but an early adopter. So like Bobby said, millennials were basically just getting made fun of when he started Millennial Money Man, right? It wasn't a thing it is today. It's saturated, but because you were early on, right? You said you had a lot of success. But also, I challenge you, be the best. Be the best. Look at stuff that, I look at constantly. I'm always looking at blogs, and I'm like, what is it that I don't like about that? What can I do different? And I look at my own blog, and I say, what is it that I don't like about that? Other people are going to have success. And here's another thing, big takeaway here. There are so many different ways to be successful. You don't have to follow the person that's already done it. You can tweak it, you can mimic it, but I'm not saying reinvent the wheel. Make it your own. You don't have to basically do everything exactly the same.
Yeah, what's funny is I actually just had a tweet that kind of went like semi-viral, which that has never happened for me. But it was that same message. It was like, I think a lot of content creators and bloggers and just entrepreneurs in general, they're so focused on being the next whatever, the next Dave Ramsey or the next whoever, whatever entrepreneur. And they don't focus on just being the first them. And I think that there's, for me, like you asked me, well, I don't want to give away what you asked me, but you're going to ask me a question later. And I had to think about it. I don't consume a lot of content from other people. A lot of people are like, hey, did you check out what this blogger said? I don't read blogs really. I don't read a lot of books. I just focus on my thing, try to tell my story and spread the message that I'm really passionate about. And it's worked really well. And so I just think that if you're kind of looking at everybody else and worrying about everybody else's stuff all the time, then you're not going to really develop your own voice.
Bobby, you kind of caught me off guard there. I was under the impression that you go to the Money Peach blog and podcast.
Well, it's nothing personal. And I've actually had, I read some blogs, but I just want to do my thing, and I feel like if I consume other people's content, then I'll like slowly morph into like what they are. And so I've found that I've had a lot of success just like kind of almost getting tunnel vision and just doing my own thing. That's not to say I don't ever like try to learn about new things or anything like that, but I just try to do whatever it is that I'm doing the best that I can.
No, I'm just kidding. Bobby, people, Millennial Money Man, we're going to put links in our show notes. They go to Millennial Money Man right now. What can they expect and how can you help them?
Well, there are a couple different things. You're going to basically just get me talking to you about random stuff, personal finance and side hustles. I think it's pretty relaxed. I write a lot of content. I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday posts. I do a lot of like reader interviews and I do a lot of guest posts. It's kind of like I document what's going on in my life a lot of the time. So you're not going to get like just a bunch of app reviews or a bunch of book reviews. Like it's just, I just write about things that I think are important at the time. Where I've had the most success lately is we have some different courses that we sell now that basically teach people how to do side hustles. We have a course called the Facebook Side Hustle course that just launched in January that was insanely successful. We had 500 people jump in on that, and it basically teaches you how to run Facebook ads for local businesses. Within a month of that course being live, we already have people that are making $3,000 and $4,000 a month. Like they've signed clients on for contracts for that. So yeah, side hustles, personal finance, and just in general, it's just a lot of fun, I think.
Awesome. All right. So I am going to hit you up with a question. I told you I was going to hit you up. So a lot of the knowledge I get, not from like how to create a blog, but just in general, is I'm always reading, trying to figure out, different things on personal development, business, money, even relationships, right? I'm even reading a book right now on how to be a better husband, right? Because I could definitely do that. But what would you recommend? If you could give away one book or one piece of something that people could read and listen to, what would it be?
Oh man. Yeah, that's tough because like I told you, I don't read a lot of books. Like I'm always like embarrassed to say that because I feel like a lot of people in kind of my industry are like avid book readers and read a ton of books. But I don't know. I feel like I don't have, like I work so much. You were asking me like how much I work. I work a lot. One of my favorite books is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I know like there's a lot of people that do not like that book, but I like it from the mindset of money of just, that book, I read it and it kind of changed the way that I looked at how I spend my time. I want to continue to build assets instead of buying liabilities. I mean, there's a lot of things about Robert Kiyosaki that people don't like because he's very like sales pitch oriented and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like that particular book is really good. It's my favorite book. So if I could give one away, I'd probably give that one away.
That's been recommended quite a bit on the show too. So we'll put links in the show notes to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. And so next question I have for you is home screen of your phone. What do you got on your home screen?
I have a picture that I took out of I was sitting in an airplane and it was a picture of the Bahamas when my wife and I went to the Bahamas for our honeymoon. It was one of those things like it was our first vacation because we didn't do vacations because we were saving money and paying off debt and all that stuff. And so I took a picture out of the window and it's like a really beautiful picture of the Bahamas and it's awesome. So that's it.
Very cool. Kind of that whole full circle thing, right? Going from sacrificing, living with in-laws, 10 by 10 bedroom, driving crappy cars to going to the Bahamas. Hey, Bobby, thanks so much for coming to the show. Millennial Money Man is one of my absolute favorite sites. As a blogger, we're all kind of in a similar niche. So, I point to a lot of sites. I'm like, he's not doing this right. But I look at your site quite a bit. I'm not there every day either, but I look at it quite a bit. And I'm like, man, I love this site. I love the content. I can read it. And I actually sometimes start laughing because I'm like, yes, I understand what you're saying here. So glad to have you in the blogosphere. Glad that you're helping out thousands and thousands of people. And hopefully maybe down the road, we have you back on the show to talk about what else you got, what you're up to.
Man, that sounds great. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. Like I said, this is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. So I appreciate it.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, anything that Bobby and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session86. That's moneypeach.com/session86. Special thanks goes out to my producer, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, this show would not be possible. We'll see you guys next week where I bring on a fabulous guest who decided to pay off $30,000 in a very, very short amount of time. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Hey guys, did you know Andrew and I were once living paycheck to paycheck and we had racked up $52,000 in consumer debt in only 4 years of marriage? Yeah, we were normal until we hit rock bottom. You see, since that moment, we decided to stop borrowing money, stop using credit cards, pay with cash, and then we did the unthinkable and we paid off $52,000 in only 7 months. Sounds crazy, right? Well, maybe not as crazy as working nonstop to send all of our money to the bank in the form of payments. Here's the deal. I'm hosting a free workshop where I share our story and I show you the same step-by-step method to going from broke to debt-free and then on to building wealth. So head on over to moneypeach.com/workshop to grab your spot in this free online training that I promise you are going to absolutely love. Once again, that's moneypeach.com/workshop. Boom, da-ba-doom, boom, da-ba-doom.